The views and opinions expressed on the show are those of the guests or hosts, and not necessarily those of the advertisers, networks, platforms, or stations. Warning that the content of the show may not be suitable for all audiences, and that viewer discretion is advised. The show does not intend to provide medical, legal, or financial advice, and viewers or listeners should consult with a professional before making any decisions based on the information presented.
All right. Well, welcome back, everybody, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio Live. We are broadcasting from 300 feet deep in an abandoned nuclear missile silo, lost somewhere in the post-apocalyptic wastelands of the Dakota Territories. And high above us today, there was a swarm of flying monkeys. They were throwing radioactive monkey droppings at us and looking for human flesh. I'm joined, as always, by the paranormal crime-fighting duo, Daisy and the Sundance Kid. And this has been a crazy day. Sad day for America, sad day for our democracy. And I'm referring, of course, to the assassination of Mr. Kirk and the fact that it was clearly a political assassination does not bode well for our democracy as a whole going forward. And that's something that we're going to be discussing tonight for sure, and how that ties into all of this other craziness that's happening really kind of simultaneously. If you've been following the show at all, you'll know that I sort of track the webbot prophecies. I refer to them as cyber prophecies because really I incorporate also the findings from various remote control, premier remote control groups around the world that have track records of actually achieving hits on their targets, and kind of combine those various factors and compare them. And whenever you get an alignment with that and with other information that's out there available on the web through open source intelligence gathering, which is sort of my specialty, then you come up with what I call the cyber prophecies. And we've been talking about those for a number of broadcasts. This past summer, still is the summer, but really it feels like the fall whenever you have college football starting. That's fall for me. I mean, it already hit like 40-something degrees here in the Dakotas during the night, just the other night. So, but it was the summer of emergence when we had various bumps in the event stream began to take place, leading to this fall, which is going to be a time of real change. Major change is coming if the cyber prophecies continue to be accurate, and they have been accurate on a number of points and continue to be so as far as we can tell. Some of these dominoes that are predicted to fall have to do with the fact that you're going to see a time period here where you have an alien ship basically show up. At least we don't really know what 3-Eye Atlas is. Maybe it's just the weirdest comet anybody ever saw. It's possible. Maybe it's an alien ship. But either way, it's turning worldwide conversations to the alien question. And so you're going to see a culmination of people taking on that conversation at a time when, and I mean widespread, very vocal talking about it in public and things like that kind of conversation taking place with a wide array of other turbulence that is also predicted to take place simultaneous to this. And that would be really the implosion of the US dollar. You look at financial news today, nobody's talking about that. The idea that the US dollar could suddenly and totally implode, but it can. And there are a various series of dominoes that could fall, and if they did, it would lead exactly to that and the widespread acceptance of cryptocurrencies as prophesied by the cyber prophecies. So, and really it would be a natural adoption. When currencies fail, of course, you would turn to something else as a currency. Just right before I got on the air this evening, received some information from the guys over at $2 Investing, which if you follow any financial, podcast type of content out there, you should be familiar with them. They're highly respected and some of the smarter financial minds out there, but they just posted something about Donald Trump declaring gold to be a currency in the United States. That's really strange for them to post something like that if they didn't have some sort of inside information that was telling them that what's about to happen is that gold will be legally acceptable, let's put it that way, as a form of payment anywhere. It's that kind of a thing. You can pay for stuff in gold. That's pretty scary stuff, because that really would signal what all these other indicators have been telling us for a long time, and that's the fact that they just printed way too much money. They printed trillions more than they've reported to anybody. Those trillions of dollars are out there around the world, and that's why it's considered reserve currency. But all of those trillions are going to end up coming back to the U.S. It will lead to ultra hyperinflation. So, and you're seeing signs of that now. Like if you go grocery shopping, you can tell. They say, they report on the news that inflation isn't bad, but it's out there, and it's it's not this administration's fault. They're trying to do everything they can with tariffs, etc. Somebody saw the real books and said, OMG, we got a real problem on our hands. Major problem. We can't really just come out and say that because it's going to cause widespread financial panic. So what do? We try to come up with tariffs and things like that as an extra revenue source to be able to prop up our currency, which is 38 trillion in debt. We spend more just servicing the debt in America than we spend on our military every year. That is a formula for ultimate disaster. So, it's not meant to scare anyone. It's meant to wake people up to the realities of what's about to take place. And the webbot for a very long time now with Cliff High, and I was reminded of something important by Cliff today that I'll relay to you guys. But the webbot's predicted for a long time that there would be a demise of the U.S. dollar, and not just the U.S. dollar. It's really kind of a demise of the old petrol-based debt system. It's just become too laborious. There's no way for that to continue. and you just keep racking up more and more and more. Where does it ever end? There's no way that anybody can ever repay $38 trillion. Impossible, especially when you have huge national entitlements the way that they have in America now, very much like some socialized countries, which is, a slow creeping in that direction, which is also very scary for many Americans and could feed into this whole idea. And I mentioned Charlie Kirk earlier. It's really sad that he was assassinated today, but more than that, something changed today. A switch was flipped today. I would wager that going forward after today, this particular assassination is going to cause ripples through our society, which most people can only barely imagine right now, and may constitute the very first real shot fired in a very real new American Civil War. That's a possibility, because what they did today, whoever was responsible for this, picked the wrong person at the exact wrong time, or perhaps it was all a plan to pick the exact right person at the exact right time. However you want to view it or frame it, either way, killing this particular person at this particular time is doing so at a time where you are already at a major tipping point, and somebody just went up and they didn't go like this. They drop kicked it off the cliff. So there's going to be huge repercussions for this. Huge repercussions. And there are various elements that are also extremely right-wing leaning in this country, who I can only predict are coming for scalps on that one. This is not going to end well. So what happened today is potentially a history-making, forever society-changing event. And I wouldn't write it off as anything less than that. Now, it does not escape my attention at all that this assassination occurred perfectly to take up the entire news cycle on a day after Congress was just shown indisputable proof in public hearings of the alien presence on this planet. And by that, I mean they were shown video proof. Video taken from a Reaper drone that was sent to intercept a UFO. And when it got there, the operator of the drone, whether we don't know where the command came from, how high up the food chain this command came from, but the Reaper drone fired a Hellfire missile at this alien craft, and it bounced off it. So that put the fear of God into a whole lot of government people today, or yesterday, sorry. But today, would have been the day. And you saw this morning a couple of stories run on ABC and CBS about this footage. It was going to be big time story on tonight's news. And all of a sudden, you get another coincidental killing that ends up wiping that off the news cycle altogether. Now, is that just pure conspiracy vomit spewing, or is that a plausible connection of some kind? You know, probability is low, but definitely not zero. In other words, there is a probability above zero that there is that connection. You know, not a lot is known. They say the shooter was from a perched position higher than the target from some distance away. I can tell you, you know, you have to be somebody who's at least practiced and, you know, maybe been a hunter or gone to the range with your rifle numerous times or something like that to be able to even come close to having an accurate enough shot. You also have to, you know, sight in your scope, and that has to be sighted for a certain distance. And yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, you know. There's not often somebody that's not been practicing or trained or something like that that assassinates somebody from a distance with a high-powered weapon that is just some random madman that just decided that day they're going to get a rifle and go try to pull off an assassination. That just doesn't happen. It takes more than that. And because of that, this is going to be a very interesting investigation. We'll see how or where this turns. I can say that if this ultimately turns out to be just some left-wing indoctrinated person suffering from Trump derangement syndrome who has been fed a non-stop stream of vile and unwarranted, false information regarding probably Charlie Kirk and the entire Trump administration and MAGA and the whole thing. People here that live in America know exactly what I'm talking about. And, you know, if that's the case, then I just, as an observer, predict that there are elements within the right-wing part of this country who will feel forced to take some sort of action. That's just my estimation. That does not bode well for our immediate future. It does not bode well for the currency, and that all feeds into the same thing. The Webbot also predicts that as this sort of implosion of the economy occurs, these people that have kept a secret all these many years because they are personally profiting from doing so, have all of that money just dry up. It's not there anymore. And so the impetus for them to keep taking the risk of keeping it a secret goes away. And as that risk goes away, it is predicted that it becomes a non-stop information flow regarding UAP, UFO disclosure. That is working on our behalf, and it's all part of really universal karma flow. It all has to do with the fact that the architect of the reality matrix that we find ourselves in created a universe that has a self-revealing nature and will bypass those filters that have been falsely put up by people in our society in such a way that it becomes known to the everyday people the truth of what's occurring. That's what's predicted by the Webbot. And at the same time, you're going to have what's called the emergence of sci-fi world, right? It has long predicted the emergence of sci-fi world. Well, it would be a natural evolution that if the secrecy surrounding alien technology goes away and that technology then openly finds its way out to public hands for the people to use and benefit their lives from, which is what the universe intends, then you're going to have a situation by which sci-fi world can truly emerge. And you're talking about really living an existence very much like that depicted in the Star Wars movies. You know, you're sort of in a spot in the planetary cycle where humans will begin to take on all kinds of special abilities and really heightened psychic abilities and things like manipulating the Force and all of that kind of stuff. At the same time, when you have an explosion of technology take place because of all of this back-engineered alien technology that makes its way out to the public. So after our break, we'll be talking some more about this, but I will also be trying to get to the lost colony of Mars, as I promised last week. And we're going to talk about what happened in the UAP disclosure hearings yesterday. A lot happened. Anna Paulina Luna, the congresswoman, is my new hero, and we'll get back to that after our break.
I'm Sarah, and this is my story.
I'm Ellen, and this is my story.
One night, I was at a bar. I was having fun with my friends.
I
had one too many drinks. I got behind the wheel to go home.
I got a cab to go home.
All of a sudden, from out of nowhere, a squirrel ran across the road.
It
happened so quickly, I barely had time to react.
The cabbie barely had time to react.
I swerved.
The cab swerved.
I can't believe it. I hit a guy.
I cannot believe it. The cabbie just missed a guy.
I wish I took a cab.
Thank goodness I took a cab.
You have the choice to save a life. Don't drive buzzed. It's a decision you'll never regret. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. Brought to you by the Department of Transportation and the Ad Council.
Shadows creep, monsters leave. In the woods, strange voices. Shadows creep in the woods, monsters leave. In the woods, bright noises. was mystical. Airwaves mystical. Mystical. UFO. Alien overlord.
From ancient times to modern days, legends of creatures in sudden disarray. Hear them speak through frequencies. Alien connections.
Tune it in, break it out, truth untold. Tune it in, cosmic mystery. Dark woods where legends breathe. Paranormal whispers, can you believe? Bigfoot strikes through the veils. Dogman howls in the midnight tale. From the static, revelations pour. Portals open, dimensions roar. Starry skies, echoes of the truth, no disguise. Cryptid shadows creeping near. Through the static, voices clear. Dark woods where legends breathe. Paranormal whispers, can you believe? It's the Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio. Whoa. Wednesday nights, enjoy the show. It's how we spend our Wednesday nights. Yay, it's crank that dial and dim the show. It's how we spend our Wednesday nights.
Welcome back, everybody, to Paranormal Intelligence Agency Radio Live. I'm your host, Jack Carey, your personal tour guide to the Twilight Zone, the Minister of the Sinister. And tonight we are talking about, sad times, the assassination of a, I wouldn't say a political figure, but a figure in the political world. Let's put it that way, and a big one at that. And this one's going to cause major change. And that's tying in a lot of different ways. The UAP disclosure hearings were interesting. These were, in my opinion, still, we're not getting the, scientists who actually did the back engineering. We're not getting the security guard that's tasked with standing there with a gun next to the UFO all day long, every day. We're not getting those witnesses yet. They are trying to pass some new legislation which will protect whistleblowers in such a way that these people who are reluctant at the moment to give up their security and their income and everything else would probably come forward if this new legislation is passed. And that's something we'll just have to see how that comes about. But the Congress was shown this video, And this video is of a Reaper drone. Not sure who was piloting the Reaper drone, but it shot a Hellfire missile and it bounced off the UFO. You know, it all makes sense from a physics point of view. Like if you were flying a craft that generates its own gravity waves, well, gravity waves would work like a force field around the craft and would do exactly what you saw on the video. If you haven't seen the video, it's readily available out there with any search. So, but I guess kind of the hero of the day is this, pardon me, Congresswoman named Anna Paulina Luna. And she is sort of she's in charge of a committee to sort of release government secrets. She did the JFK papers and all that kind of stuff. And she's in charge of this UAP task force committee, whatever you want to call it. And today she called Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick a proven and known liar. And who is he? Well, he's the former head of the Pentagon's Aero Office, which is their UFO program. And so basically she said the guy that they put in charge was the wolf in the hen house, and that he was openly lying to various senators, congressmen, anybody else he can get his hands on. He's apparently Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick. Look him up online so you can see a picture of him, so you can shun him if you see him. He's apparently a disinformation agent for the Dark Cabal, which is keeping all of this a secret and benefiting from it. And, you know, these people have to be called out. The other person that got called out today by Ross Coulthart over at News Nation, interestingly enough, reported a very interesting piece of inside intelligence that I'll relay to you guys, and that is that he has a first-hand source as a journalist that is telling him that there was a deal that had been made between Robert Bigelow, that's right, the Robert Bigelow of Bigelow Aerospace and the former owner of Skinwalker Ranch, to acquire for an unknown sum, and Robert Bigelow is a billionaire, but to acquire for an unknown sum from Lockheed Martin an actual alien craft. This transference of technology was taking place when none other than a man named Glenn Gaffney, look him up, who's in charge of the CIA's Exotic Technology Division, showed up with a bunch of CIA agents and shut the whole thing down. So now you're beginning to see the names, the faces, the actual people that are perpetrating this crime against the American people and the people of the world. You know, once you know their name and you know their face, from that point, you know, at some point, there's going to be pressure applied in a proper way that will get them to stop doing what they're doing. So all of that's culminating this week. You have just a crazy amount of things taking place around the world. And we might as well tie this in too, because, you know, we're being overwhelmed with geopolitical change and events, and nobody can overlook the war between Russia and Ukraine. It was reported by some French news outlets that a letter had been circulated to hospitals all around France, telling them to prepare for wartime casualties as early as March of 2026. Just today, Russia launched drones into Poland, which is a NATO country. Most of those drones were shot down, but what you're seeing is the beginnings of World War III. And yes, World War III will take place at the same time that you have this sort of alien presence overload in the minds of the community, at the same time that you have an implosion of the old petrodollar debt system, an adoption of cryptocurrencies worldwide, tied probably to precious metals in some fashion and to rare earth minerals, things that have, real physical value of some kind. And that is also going to tie into this whole big fiasco that's about to take place. So I reported many months ago that the guys over at farsight.org had told everybody and predicted and had successfully targeted the war in between Russia and Ukraine. And they said, if you feed this fire will spread. And they were right. So you're getting ready to see NATO engage Russia. There will be troops on the ground, if they're not there already, from France and Germany. Poland has just built the largest army in all of Europe. Look that up if you're unfamiliar with that fact. And they just sent drones into the wrong country. Poland was the wrong country to poke with a stick. Poland has been working out, and Poland has a massive military, believe it or not. So you're going to see some serious stuff begin to happen and take place, and it's entirely possible, perhaps even likely, that you'll see a full-on Chinese invasion of Taiwan timed with a conflict with Russia. So yeah, hold on to your seats, hold on to your butts, because this is going to get interesting. I posted just today on social media that there is extreme turbulence coming. You need to prepare yourselves, and I've been reporting for months that there were indications that there was going to be a time coming up late summer into the fall, and really over the course of the next year or two of extreme change taking place. So really my advice for people out there is to kind of, and I've been saying this for a long time now, reinforce where you are, where you live. If you have the means by which to not live near large populations of people, that's highly advised. And so, harden your structures. I don't mean that you're going to get bombed or anything like that. I mean, make sure that they're sort of crime proof, however you have to do that. And get ready for a time when people are really going to kind of seek time indoors in their own little oases and spaces. This will be, not a pandemic forcing people to stay in. This will be people saying, oh my God, the world has absolutely exploded. All I want to do is just go home and pretend like everything's okay. So that's really kind of the future for a little while that you begin to see. It will be shock. So interesting stuff and interesting times ahead. Really, Paranormal in the News is all about the hearings that took place. Coulthard's reporting that there are various so-called anonymous staffers in congressional wings that are sort of responsible right now for keeping a lot of the UAP stuff a secret. And he goes on to say that a lot of these people are people that you never see in front of the camera, but they're people that, like, the aerospace industry companies come to and say, hey, if you do such and such, we'll give you a high-paying job when you're out of the government. And they do it. There is a personal greedy impetus by these people to benefit off of doing exactly what they do. And how long will that persist? Well, Webbot says that money goes away, and when it does, all you know what breaks loose. So today, some serious crap has hit the fan, and boy, I think it's going to cause quick, radical change. It's interesting because this particular assassination really kind of came out of the clear blue sky as far as Wooland is considered. As far as I know, no remote viewing group, Webbot, data stream, etc. had predicted this big of an emotional event taking place. Normally, an event this big would show up in the language structures around the world, and then that would in turn show up in the Webbot data stream. But basically, it may have, this particular event may be small compared to what's about to happen. In other words, long story short, that could be why it wasn't zeroed in on specifically. Because right here, when you look at sort of a timeline map of things that it has predicted, is a big, bumpy road. So, interesting stuff. Last week I talked about the lost city of the Grand Canyon, and I wanted to get into the lost colony of Mars. Now, it's interesting because the lost colony of Mars is something that very few people are aware of. There is an evidence stream for it to back it up. I was able to trace this evidence stream all the way back to the Club of Rome, and there are three alternatives for global overpopulation. They chose alternative 3. Alternative 1 was controlled warfare. As I explained last week, the proliferation of nuclear weapons makes that an untenable thing to try to perpetrate. Option 2 or alternative 2 was attempting to create a one world belief system that had in it controls for breeding. And alternative 3 proved to be the one they chose, probably because it was the first to seem to be an impossibility. Controlling worldwide belief systems is something that would be really an impossible task. And so they chose alternative 3, off-world colonization. They then chose a mechanism by which they could pay for it. And, you know, some of that mechanism was discovered by the Doge people when they discovered the magic money machines at the Treasury that had just been sitting there and printing and printing and printing. And that money was just disappearing down black holes that couldn't even be traced. They even took the codes off of where all that money was going, so it couldn't be traced, right? there's indications that Mosk and his team still found out where it was going. But way back when, in the 90s, it was Donald Rumsfeld under the Bush administration that publicly stated that there was $23 trillion missing from the Pentagon's budget, according to the GAO, or the General Accounting Office, and that some of that money probably ended up paying for the colony on Mars. The next point of evidence in the data stream for the colony shows up in the form of Laura Magdalene Eisenhower, the great-granddaughter of Dwight D. Eisenhower, who came out publicly and stated, and still does state, many, many years later, decades later now, that she was romantically involved with an intelligence agent who was part of the program and who tried to recruit her into the colony on Mars. Direct, first-hand testimony from the great-granddaughter of a former president. That's pretty big. Then you have the efforts of the British hacker Gary McKinnon, who may not seem like he's related to all of this, but what did McKinnon do? He hacked into the NSA and the NASA computers, and he was able to download, even though this was a long time ago and it took his computers forever, he was able to download a list of so-called non-terrestrial officers. And along with that, actual high-resolution photographs of large spacecrafts, proving, by the way, that we did have the means, motive, and opportunity to pull off a colony on Mars. Then you have the efforts of one of the premier remote viewing groups around the planet, that is the Farside.org group, headed by Dr. Courtney Brown. And many years ago, Dr. Courtney Brown discovered in the NASA archives a photograph of the surface of Mars depicting a dome that had a tube coming out of it, and the tube was ejecting a liquid. It's a gigantic dome. There were two other structures nearby that appeared to be two smaller domes. They too appeared to have some sort of liquid being ejected from them from a pipe-like structure. He decided what an interesting target that would be to blindly give to his remote viewers. And he did. And what his remote viewers ended up seeing in their sessions was truly shocking. They discovered that within the domes there were humans. Not Martians, but humans. The humans appeared to be dealing with an alien technology they did not quite yet understand. In other words, the domes that they're living in were already there on the surface when they got there, and they started living in these domes. They more than likely knew that these structures were there before they reached the planet. The remote viewers reported that the colony appeared to be in a dire situation. They were needing parts and supplies in a desperate way. And they reported identical to the testimony of Laura Magdalene Eisenhower. They reported that this was a hardship duty. In other words, the people that went to do this knew that they were never coming back. They knew it before they left, and they accepted it. In other words, they recruited people who didn't mind giving up their lives in order to try to achieve a toehold for humanity on another planet before we could breed ourselves into extinction. That was the plan. and they paid for it by siphoning off trillions of dollars of tax money from the U.S. taxpayer, or really just printing it, and now it sits there as $38 trillion in debt. To do so because they believed it that strongly, right? That kind of feeds into this whole idea of the Space Force. Space Force has to be aware now that there was a secret space program, and perhaps they are aware that the colony there exists. If they are, then I have to believe that the Trump administration knows that and knows a lot more about the UAP thing than what they're, stating. This new footage that has just come out of a UFO getting hit with a Hellfire missile and it bouncing off is probably going to change things too. A lot of journalists today said, yeah, this particular footage is a turning point. Seeing something attacked and it shake it off like that with some of the best American technology is something that they're not going to turn their attention away from. That's going to bother them. When they go to bed tonight and they lay their heads on their pillows, on their little congressional pillows, they're going to think about that video the last thing they do tonight and the first thing they do in the morning, and probably every day after that till they start to get some answers. So you're beginning to potentially see an actual unraveling of the yarn as predicted by the Webbot and by the self-revealing ontological nature of the universe and the reality matrix and how it's interacting with humans. So, I have to remind everybody it was the universe that put us into a position in the first place to acquire a technology which, as Representative Paulina Luna put it, was the equivalent of somebody dropping off an iPhone to a bunch of cavemen and expecting them to replicate it. But it was the universe that put us in that position. And we can only assume now that it's the universe that expects us to engage with it in such a way that it's going to create novelty for the species. And next week, join me for another crazy rabbit hole. We'll keep examining the events of this week as they're going to have repercussions into the many weeks to come. And I will see you guys next week. Join us on Vixen's Vault next with the lovely Nancy Planeta. I'll see you next week.